Nakondo, marriages weren't just a union between two people. They were a spectacle, judged and admired by the entire community. Here, a good wife was seen as the crown of her husband and the honor of two families. And in all of Macondo, no woman earned more praise than Lydia. Lydia was married to Samuel, a local schoolteacher known for his calm demeanor and unwavering honesty. Samuel wasn't a man of great wealth, but his integrity earned him immense respect. He lived by the principles of peace, hard work, and patience. When he married Lydia, the townspeople all agreed he had found a rare and precious treasure. From the outside, Lydia was the embodiment of perfection. Her days began before the sun rose, long before Samuel stirred. She would prepare his breakfast with care, iron his clothes until they were crisp, and walk him to the door each morning with a smile that could warm the coldest heart. Neighbors would catch glimpses of this daily ritual and whisper to each other in admiration. Church on Sundays. She was a picture of grace and humility. Sitting quietly beside her husband, her Bible held delicately in her hands. She would nod thoughtfully during sermons about love, submission, and the sacred duties of a wife. It was no surprise that other women in the community often sought her out for advice. "Lydia, how do you keep your home so peaceful?" they would ask. The very hands that waved so kindly to the neighbors would now point accusingly at Samuel, jabbing the air with every word. If he returned home, even 5 minutes later than expected, a barrage of aggressive questions awaited him. Where were you? Who were you with? Are you lying to me? If his monthly salary was even slightly less than the previous month, due to a school holiday or some other reason, she would mock him relentlessly. "Is this all you bring home?" She'd sneer, her voice dripping with contempt. "To honestly think you're a real man, providing this little?" Samuel was utterly bewildered. This wasn't the sweet, caring woman he had courted. This wasn't the woman he had stood with at the altar and promised his life to. In the beginning, he tried to rationalize her behavior. He told himself it was stress from managing the household, or perhaps some unspoken worry that was weighing on her. He resolved to be even more patient, more loving, more understanding. He would bring her little gifts, compliment her cooking, and tell her how much he appreciated everything she did. But his kindness only seemed to fuel her cruelty. Lydia grew more vicious with each passing day. She started comparing him to other men in Macondo, men who owned cars, ran successful shops, men with visible signs of power and wealth. "Look at Mr. Adebayo," she would say. "He just bought his wife a new necklace. What have you ever bought me?" She made it a daily ritual to remind him that he was falling short, that she was settling, that she deserved so much better than the life he could provide. Samuel, in his quiet way, tried to defend himself. To explain his own value and the integrity of his work, she would immediately turn his words against him. She accused him of being disrespectful, of raising his voice, of not appreciating her sacrifices. "How dare you speak to me like that?" she would cry. "After everything I do for you, this is the thanks I get." Slowly, heartbreakingly, Samuel stopped talking. He learned that silence was safer. The vibrant, confident teacher began to retreat into himself, becoming a ghost in his own home. The peace he so cherished was shattered, replaced by a constant, humming anxiety. He would sit in his chair, reading a book, but his mind would be racing, trying to anticipate her next verbal assault. At night, things grew even stranger. While Samuel tried to find rest, Lydia would stay awake, her face illuminated by the glow of her phone. She would be typing furiously, a small secret smile playing on her lips. Sometimes, a soft laugh would escape her. When Samuel, his heart heavy with suspicion, would gently ask who she was talking to so late, she would snap at him with ferocious anger. "What's wrong with you? You don't trust me?" She'd hiss, turning on the bedside lamp to glare at him. "You're becoming so insecure and pathetic." And Samuel, broken and exhausted, would apologize. He always apologized. He apologized for asking, for caring, for doubting her. He apologized for his own existence, for not being the man she wanted him to be. Tworth. What Samuel couldn't possibly know was that none of this was accidental. Lydia's cruelty wasn't a symptom of stress or unhappiness. It was a deliberate strategy. She found a deep, twisted satisfaction in controlling his emotions, in bending his will to her own. She relished watching him doubt himself, seeing the confusion and pain in his eyes. Polypadoration she received for being the perfect wife fed her ego, while the private torment she inflicted on Samuel fed her need for power. In public, she built him up, making everyone believe he was the luckiest man in Macondo. In private, she systematically broke him down, piece by piece. This dangerous balance was her addiction. It made her feel powerful, in control, alive. And as Samuel's spirit continued to wither under her relentless assault, Lydia knew, with a chilling sense of excitement, that this was only the beginning. After the first year of marriage, Samuel slowly realized that the house he thought was a home was actually a prison. From the outside, everything looked normal. Clean walls, neatly arranged furniture, and a smiling wife who greeted the neighbors politely. But inside, the atmosphere was heavy, tense, and cold. Lydia's control had grown stronger over time. She managed the household with precision, but not for comfort, for power. Samuel had always been gentle, trusting, and respectful, and Lydia used that against him. She controlled the finances, the visitors, even the smallest details of his daily routine. At first, she told Samuel it was for his own good. "If I handle the money, we can save," she said sweetly, hiding her sharpness beneath a smile. But gradually, she stopped asking for his opinion entirely. Samuel had to explain himself for every expense: transport money, food, even small items for his students. If he dared to question her, she would scold him, reminding him that he was incapable of managing anything on his own. "You are always so careless," she said coldly one morning when he forgot to pay a small bill. "Do you even understand responsibility?" Samuel apologized silently. He wanted peace. He wanted the woman he married, not this ruler who had taken his life hostage. Lydia also isolated him from family and friends. When Samuel's younger sister visited, Lydia acted polite on the surface, but later whispered to Samuel, "Your family does not respect me. If they come again, they will cause more problems." Gradually, Samuel stopped seeing anyone outside their home. His mother's calls were always intercepted by Lydia, and she twisted his words to make him seem rude. Slowly, Samuel became alone, trapped in the very house he thought of as safe. Inside the walls, Lydia's cruelty was relentless. She did not need violence. Her words were weapons. Every morning, she reminded him of his flaws, the amount of money he earned, the simplicity of his work, even the way he smiled. She compared him to men she claimed were better, richer, stronger. She laughed when he tried to defend himself. "You are too soft," she sneered one evening. "No woman will ever respect you. You should be grateful that I am still here." Samuel began doubting his own mind. He questioned whether he had been blind to some hidden flaw, whether the life he had built was meaningless. Night after night, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trapped by exhaustion, fear, and confusion. While he suffered, Lydia led a double life. At night, she locked herself in her room and spoke to a man named Victor, a wealthy businessman from the city. Too. Her voice softened, her laughter returned, and she was no longer the cold, controlling wife Samuel had to face during the day. She shared her plans with Victor, describing Samuel as weak, useless, and a man to be manipulated. Lydia was not unhappy. She was careful and calculating. Her ultimate plan was simple: destroy Samuel quietly, gain sympathy, and eventually leave him with her reputation untarnished. But to make it more convincing, she needed him to look weak. She needed him to doubt himself, and she succeeded. Samuel's confidence began to fade. His sleep suffered. He lost his appetite. At work, he felt distracted, unable to focus. He was shrinking in every way Lydia had intended. And yet, he could not confront her. Her smile in public, Her flawless image made him fear that no one would believe him if he ever tried to speak. In public, Lydia was a model wife. She smiled at neighbors, helped the elderly, and even visited church every Sunday. Hand in hand with Samuel, whispering gentle words of faith, people praised her. Samuel felt invisible in her shadow. The tension inside the house escalated further. Lydia criticized the smallest details, the way he washed dishes, folded clothes, or even walked across the floor. Her words were sharp, precise, and calculated. If Samuel tried to defend himself, she would accuse him of disrespect. If he stayed silent, she would mock him for weakness. One evening, she whispered in his ear, "You should thank me for staying with you." No one else would. Samuel felt his spirit breaking. He had tried patience, understanding, and silence, but nothing softened Lydia. The home that should have been a sanctuary had become a battlefield, where every word, every action, every glance was judged and punished. And yet, Samuel still loved her, still believed that somewhere inside, Lydia was the woman he married. But Lydia's eyes glimmered with triumph whenever he looked for that love. She was feeding off his fear, and the longer he endured, the stronger her control became. It was a home built on fear, and the walls were closing in. But even the most carefully built prison has cracks. Lydia had been so confident in her manipulation that she underestimated one thing: Samuel's attention. Slowly, he began noticing inconsistencies, small details that didn't fit the image Lydia presented to the world. Her late-night phone calls, her sudden excitement at messages, her overly polished appearance when she left the house for errands. These small cracks would eventually grow into the collapse of her carefully constructed world. The morning of the town meeting was thick, with a tension you could almost touch. The sun was just beginning to warm the rooftops of Macondo, but inside Samuel's home, a deep chill had already settled. Lydia, his wife, had been preparing for this day for months. She stood before the mirror, her reflection staring back with practiced perfection. Her dress was simple, almost modest, but undeniably elegant. A carefully arranged headscarf framed her face, drawing attention to her eyes. She rehearsed her expressions over and over. A flicker of sadness in her eyes. A slight, almost imperceptible tremble of her lips. A posture of pure, unadulterated humility. Today, she was determined to speak first, and with her words, she would utterly demolish Samuel's reputation. Samuel, bless his heart, was completely unaware of the storm about to break. They would discuss crops, maybe some repairs to the old bridge, the usual town business. As they left the house, Lydia took his hand, but her fingers were cold as ice, and she refused to meet his gaze. When they stepped into the hall, the space was already buzzing with villagers. Respected elders occupied the front benches, their faces etched with the wisdom of years, while the rest of the townspeople filled the seats behind them, their chatter filling the air. The meeting started as expected. Announcements were made about the upcoming harvest, the status of school repairs, and other mundane community matters. Throughout it all, Lydia sat beside Samuel, the very picture of a demure and obedient wife. Instantly, a hush fell over the room. Every head turned in her direction. Her voice, when she began to speak, quivered just slightly, as if she were wrestling with a deep fear. But her eyes, oh, her eyes, they caught the sunlight streaming through the windows, and the tears that welled up in them glistened like tiny diamonds. A collective gasp swept through the crowd. Women leaned in, whispering urgently to one another. The elders, at the front, leaned forward, their brows furrowed in deep concern. He looked at Lydia, his face a mask of confusion and rising terror. Her words were a masterclass in manipulation, carefully chosen to paint him as a villain without a single direct accusation. "I have suffered," Lydia continued, her voice trembling with just the right amount of practiced emotion. "I cannot speak of everything," she breathed, "but there are things that no person should have to endure alone. Things that make you afraid in your own home." That was it. The elders, the villagers, everyone turned to look at him, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief. Samuel opened his mouth, a desperate attempt to defend himself, but the words wouldn't come. How could he describe his own fear and pain without sounding defensive and guilty? Lydia, a true performer, let the silence stretch, allowing her glistening tears and fragile posture to do the talking. She didn't need to sob. The crowd was already filling in the emotional blanks for her. I hoped he would change," she whispered, a final, heartbreaking touch. "I prayed, I endured, I waited, and now, I must speak for myself." Samuel's heart plummeted. He had genuinely believed that with enough love and patience, he could heal their fractured marriage. But now, seeing her performance, he realized the terrifying depth of his misjudgment. The elders, fulfilling their duty, asked him to respond. He rose to his feet slowly, his legs feeling like lead. "I respect her. I love her." His words were sincere, but they were no match for Lydia's well-rehearsed tears and trembling hands. She had thought of every detail, the sad, downcast eyes, the humble posture, the perfectly timed glances towards sympathetic neighbors. It was all a show designed to make him look guilty. Samuel's weak defense. Lydia stepped forward, her voice now carrying a soft, newfound authority. More whispers. Samuel felt the walls of the hall closing in on him. He sat down, feeling utterly drained and humiliated, the weight of the entire village's judgment pressing down on him. For the first time, he saw the full, horrifying scope of Lydia's deception. But even in her moment of triumph, Lydia made a critical error. As Lydia brought her performance to a close, her voice dropped again, barely audible. "I have spoken my truth," she declared, "though it may cost me everything." The room erupted in a low roar of murmurs. Women rushed to her side, embracing her, praising her courage. Samuel just sat there, defeated, as he felt the community he had known his whole life turn against him. He finally understood that the battle for the truth had only just begun. Lydia's mask was convincing, but it was not flawless. Today, she chose to speak first had given her immense power, but it had also set in motion the very events that would ultimately lead to her own downfall. Slobe. After that heated community meeting, something strange happened in Macondo. Lydia, who had just accused her husband Samuel of terrible things, suddenly became the town's darling. She was the center of all sympathy. Women would visit her every single day, bringing little gifts of food and whispering words of comfort. The town elders, respected and wise, sent messengers to check on her, asking if she was safe, if she needed anything. In the eyes of Macondo, Lydia was no longer just a wife. She was a martyr, a long-suffering woman who had finally, bravely, found her voice. And let me tell you, Lydia played this role like a seasoned actress. In public, she was the picture of quiet sorrow. She barely spoke, and when she did, her voice was soft, almost a whisper. Her eyes, always downcast, seemed to hold a universe of sadness. She'd thank everyone for their kindness, for their concern, and would always add that she was just praying for peace, for things to get better. Every word was a masterpiece of manipulation. Every tear was perfectly timed, falling just when it would have the most impact. Samuel, on the other hand, became a ghost in his own town. The life he knew vanished overnight. People who once greeted him with a warm smile and a friendly handshake now stared right through him. Some would literally cross the street just to avoid passing him. The whispers followed him everywhere, especially at the school where he taught. Parents would gather in small groups, their heads close together, their eyes darting towards him. Didn't take long for his headmaster to call him into his office. He was a kind man, and he asked gently, "Samuel, is everything all right at home?" Samuel, a man of integrity, answered honestly. He tried to explain, but his quiet, truthful words were like a whisper against the hurricane of Lydia's performance. Honesty seemed weak, flimsy, next to her compelling drama. At home, away from the sympathetic eyes of the town, Lydia's cruelty didn't just continue. It escalated. Now, she felt untouchable. "You see how easy it is?" She taunted him one evening, a smug smile on her face. "All I had to do was cry a little." For the first time, a spark of real anger ignited within Samuel. But it was quickly smothered by a wave of bone-deep exhaustion. What was the point? He stopped arguing. He stopped trying to defend himself. He just endured. He retreated into himself, becoming a silent observer of his own life's destruction. But here's the thing about lies, especially big ones. They have a fatal weakness. They need everyone else to stay silent. And in Macondo, not everyone was silent. One afternoon, Mama Ruth, a respected elderly woman who lived just 2 houses away, decided to pay a visit to one of the town elders. Mama Ruth was known for her wisdom and for the fact that she never spoke unless it was absolutely necessary. So when she spoke, people listened. "What Lydia is saying," Mama Ruth began, her voice calm and steady, "is not the complete truth." The elder looked up, surprised. "What do you mean, Mama Ruth?" She then explained what she had witnessed over many nights. She told him about the shouting she often heard coming from Samuel's house. But the voice, she clarified, the angry, screaming voice, was always Lydia's. It was never Samuel's. She had seen Lydia storming out of the house in a rage, with Samuel following behind her, not shouting, but trying to calm her down, his posture always one of quiet desperation. Around the same time, another crack appeared in Lydia's carefully constructed story. A young man who worked at the market was chatting with his friend. He mentioned seeing Lydia, not looking sad at all, but laughing and holding hands with a well-dressed man from the city. The story started as a small rumor, a little piece of gossip, but like a seed, it found fertile ground and began to grow. It traveled from person to person until it eventually reached the ears of the elders. They heard the whispers, and they decided it was their duty to look a little deeper into the matter. Meanwhile, Lydia was floating on a cloud of her own success. She grew careless, overconfident. She thought she had the entire town wrapped around her finger. She started spending more and more time on her phone again, that secret smile playing on her lips as she typed furiously. Sometimes, she would step outside late at night, pacing in the dark as she made quiet, urgent phone calls. One evening, fate intervened. Samuel was walking through the living room when Lydia's phone, left on the table, lit up. A message, notification flashed across the screen. The contact name was simple, V, and the message was chilling. "Soon, you will be free. I am waiting." Samuel's hands started to shake. The air left his lungs. He felt a cold dread wash over him, But he didn't confront her, not this time. For the first time in years, he did something different. He stopped reacting and started observing. He started paying attention. In the days that followed, Samuel's world came into sharp focus. He started noticing all the things he had been too exhausted or too beaten down to see before. Lydia, leaving the house dressed in her finest clothes for simple errands to the market. The notifications of money transfers on her phone, amounts that certainly didn't come from his modest teacher's salary. And her sudden, explosive anger whenever he asked a simple, innocent question about her day. The pieces of the puzzle were clicking into place, forming a picture that was far more sinister than he could have ever imagined. The elders decided it was time for another meeting. This time, Lydia walked in like a queen. She was confident, poised, ready to receive more sympathy. But the atmosphere in the room was different. It was heavy, serious. The elders didn't start with words of comfort. They started with questions. Clear, pointed questions. They asked her about specific dates, about details of the stories she had told them before, details that were now starting to contradict each other. Lydia was smooth at first, her answers flowing easily. But as the questions got more specific, her confidence began to wobble. The smooth facade started to crack. Then, Mama Ruth was asked to speak. Calmly, she recounted everything she had seen and heard the late-night shouting, Lydia's rage, Samuel's quiet attempts to make peace, and she wasn't alone. Other neighbors, emboldened by her courage, began to speak up. One mentioned seeing her with a man from the city. Another spoke of Lydia's terrifying temper. The room grew tense, the air thick with unspoken truths. Lydia's face hardened into a mask of fury. She denied everything, her voice rising with each denial. She accused them of being jealous, of conspiring against her. She started to cry again, the tears flowing on cue. But this time, something was different. The tears felt hollow, forced. They didn't move anyone. Then, it was Samuel's turn. He was asked to speak. When he stood up, his voice was still calm, but it held a new weight, a new strength. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't throw insults. He simply told the truth, spoke about years of emotional control, the isolation from his friends and family, the daily humiliation, and the constant gnawing fear. He explained that he had stayed silent for so long, not out of weakness, but to protect what he thought was a sacred marriage. The elders listened, their faces grim, their eyes fixed on him. For the very first time, Lydia looked uncertain. She looked scared. When the question of the man from the city came up again, Lydia panicked. Her answers became short, defensive, and tangled. And then, the final blow. Someone in the room held up a phone, revealing screenshots. Messages that Lydia, in her carelessness, had sent to the wrong person. Messages intended for her lover, V, now exposed for all to see. The room fell into a dead silence. You could hear a pin drop. Lydia shot to her feet, her whole body shaking with rage and humiliation. You are all against me, she screamed, her voice raw. You just want to destroy me. But it was too late. The curtain had been pulled back. Her perfect, tragic performance was over. Her carefully crafted image was shattering into a million pieces right before her eyes, and she knew it. The truth had finally found its voice. Threat. The silence in the meeting hall was a heavy, suffocating weight. For what felt like an eternity, no one spoke. Every eye was fixed on Lydia, standing, trembling in the center of the room. The armor of confidence she usually wore had shattered, leaving her exposed and vulnerable. Her shoulders were hunched, her breath coming in ragged gasps. For the very first time in her life, Lydia was not in control. Finally, one of the elders cleared his throat, his voice cutting through the tension. It was calm, yet unyielding. Lydia, he said, the word hanging in the air. Too many stories have changed, too many people have spoken. The truth, you see, does not hide forever. Lydia's eyes darted around the room, a desperate, frantic search for an ally. For a friendly face, for the sympathy she had so easily commanded before. But the crowd was different now. The very same people who had once rushed to comfort her, to defend her, now stared back with a mixture of confusion, disappointment, and a slow-burning anger. She decided to play her final card. Dropping dramatically to her knees, she cried out, her voice filled with practiced anguish. "I suffered. You have no idea what I went through. I was so lonely, so unhappy." Her words echoed, but this time, they fell flat, devoid of their usual power. They were just empty sounds in a room full of awakened minds. The elder simply raised his hand, silencing her. "Unhappiness is no excuse for destruction," he stated, his voice firm. "You did not just lie, Lydia. You systematically damaged a man's name, his reputation, and his very soul." Throughout this, Samuel sat quietly in a corner, just listening. His heart was still heavy with the scars of the past, but a profound sense of lightness was beginning to bloom within him. For years, he had been forced to carry a suffocating cloak of shame that was never his to wear. Now, at long last, the truth was standing beside him, a silent, powerful defender. The elders delivered their verdict. Lydia was found guilty of making false accusations and of calculated manipulation. Her marriage, they declared, was broken by her own destructive actions. Nakoni, the community officially withdrew its support from her. She was ordered to leave Samuel's home immediately. As the decision was announced, Lydia's facade of victimhood crumbled completely, replaced by pure, unadulterated rage. She screamed, unleashing a torrent of curses at the elders. She shrieked that Samuel had ruined her life. But her words were met with a wall of silence. No one was listening anymore. The monster, so cleverly disguised for so long, had finally been unmasked for all to see. That evening, a defeated Lydia packed her belongings in a deafening silence. The wealthy man from the city, her supposed escape, had already disappeared. The moment the first whispers of scandal reached his ears, he had blocked her number and vanished without a trace, leaving her to face the consequences alone. She stood at the gate, waiting for a wave of sympathy that never arrived. Samuel watched her from a distance. There was no smile on his face, no taunts on his lips. He felt no satisfaction, no joy in her downfall. All he felt was a quiet, profound sense of relief. The storm was over. She walked away down the dusty road, never once looking back. The days that followed were quiet, peaceful. Samuel moved out of the house for a while, staying with a friend to clear his head. He wrestled with the lingering guilt, the pain, the haunting memories. Then, slowly, something beautiful began to happen. The process of healing began. He started speaking again, his voice regaining its strength. He reconnected with his family, who welcomed him back with open arms. At his job, colleagues who had once whispered behind his back now approached him, apologizing for ever doubting him. His students greeted him with newfound respect. The cloud of suspicion that had followed him for so long finally dissipated. One evening, as Samuel stood alone under a vast, star-filled sky, a powerful realization washed over him. Silence, which had once been his prison, had trapped him in a cage of someone else's making. But the truth, raw and difficult as it was, had become his freedom. Months passed, and Lydia's name was rarely spoken in the village of Macondo. When it was, it served as a cautionary tale. She seemed so perfect, people would say, shaking their heads, but she was rotting everything from the inside out. Lydia drifted from place to place, her reputation trailing behind her like a persistent shadow. Wherever she went, trust was a currency she could no longer afford. She learned the hard way that any structure, any power built on a foundation of lies, is destined to collapse. Samuel, on the other hand, began to build a new life, one brick at a time. He learned that genuine love should never hurt. He learned that patience, when it demands the sacrifice of your own dignity, is not a virtue. And he learned the most crucial lesson of all, that sometimes, staying silent to keep the peace only ends up feeding the very evil you were trying to avoid. The village learned its lesson, too. They learned that not every victim is the one crying the loudest. They learned that not every monster has fangs and claws. Some monsters wear charming smiles. Some wear the cloak of respectability. Some sit right beside you in church. And sometimes, the most dangerous monsters of all are the ones that everyone admires. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more content.